Hey everybody, it's Stu Smith and Jeff Nichols back again with a tactical fitness report. And today we're going to talk about hypoxic training, hypoxia, exactly what it is and why you never want to do it alone.
Exactly. And I think too is it's one of those things that I think once we clearly define it, it'll allow you all a better way to train it regularly without a lot of risk as well. Because I think that there's a little bit of misconception on what it means and how do I do it and all that good stuff. So we'll clear that up.
Yeah, so I like to use it with swimming primarily. I'll be honest with you, I've never done it trying to run unless I was at altitude, right? Which is a
Yeah.
different type of style we're talking about. I'm just swimming at sea level. And I kind of use it to make swimming harder. So when I
Yeah.
am getting into better swimming shape or trying to get people into better swimming shape, we'll do freestyle sets where we'll just skip breathe. So instead of breathing every 3 or 5 strokes, we're trying to go 7, maybe even try hit 9. Or if you're an even breather on one side, just 6, 8,
Yep.
10 strokes per breath. You'll find you'll get really winded. Now, what is this doing to you in your body? Your heart rate's skyrocketing. You're not breathing as much. You're moving your muscles. And what's going on physiologically at that moment when your heart rate's at
Yeah. Yeah. So you
175?
just before we jump into that, just one thing I want you guys to understand is so we're essentially what we're saying is big picture here. We're holding our breath a little bit longer during activity, right? It's not just big deep breath and submerge myself. That's
Oh,
not
yeah.
hypoxia, and that's not hypoxic training. That is breath holding.
Right.
Now, it certainly fits in the category of being hypoxic and those sort of things. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make ourselves more efficient when we are in a deficiency, like we're swimming, our face is in the water, and we can't just breathe when we're running as well as we can when we run, of course, because our face is in the water. So what are we trying to do is and so what we're talking about is, we're getting less breaths per stroke. And as long as we maintain a level of efficiency where it just doesn't, our performance just doesn't plummet, granted, it does make it more difficult. But what you do, as long as you don't, it's like training. If you overreach constantly, you overtrain.
Yeah.
And so let's bracket this in a 500-meter swim. If you're holding your breath every 9 strokes in your first 100 in your combat side stroke, we'll say, or whatever, well, by the end, you're going to be breathing constant, real heavy. So essentially, you take the average of it. That's essentially what we're saying. You should breathe that. Instead of breathing every 9 breaths, maybe you're breathing every 3 and 4. And then you become very efficient at that, right? Over time, maybe a week or two, and you go, well, now I can elongate my breathing even more. But you see the time doesn't drop. Like it stays efficient.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what we're talking about. It's weird. Like, how little can we breathe without affecting our performance? And then it's a constant sort of cat and mouse of I'm getting out of breath, so I breathe a little bit more, but I don't just we're basically purposely breathing less than our brain is saying, but not to the point where performance just plummets. Hopefully
Right.
that makes it. So
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
your words then.
Yeah, so what's going on there? I mean, our heart rate is skyrocketing. We're probably hitting a max heart rate level somewhere in there, maybe not quite max, but close.
If you drag it out, it will, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably had 185 zone in there, hitting some
Yeah.
hypoxics,
Which
and
is real high,
which
yes.
is real high, for me, especially at 50, it's very high.
Yep.
Didn't feel like I was dying, but I was maxed out. Like, it was not a conversational pace when I stuck my head up to breathe. I had to
Yeah.
focus on breathing
Yep.
for a little bit to come down. But then you notice how quickly you come down, and that's also another gauge of how
Exactly.
well you are recovering, and how much better shape you're in too.
Yeah. That's the second component of it, folks. So to determine kind of whether or not you're in a good hypoxic training zone, right? You at the end, you create a rest period. So like, say Stu and I jump in the pool both, right? We're going to swim 300 meters. We're going to swim a similar pace. One of us decides to breathe more than the other, right? We get done with that 300 meters. Let's say Stu regulated his breathing better than he did mine for that 300-meter swim. And we swam about the same pace. And let's just, again, similar training capabilities. So Stu gets done, I get done, and we start to have a conversation. And I'm having to breathe in between conversation. But Stu gets done, takes 3 or 4 good deep breaths. Now his heart rate is still pretty elevated, but he's able to get into conversation, and his brain is like, okay, I've been here before. He's not trying to kill me. Like, and he's able to more quickly regulate his autonomic nervous system, breathing and heart rate. And if you can't, that's a sign of a little bit of, we've gone too hypoxic, and we begin overreaching a little bit. And so that's, you know, it's not cut and dry, but generally speaking, you should be able to take 3 to 5 really good breaths after your set, whether you're in the pool, whether you're in a squat rack, whether you're on the track. And you can, again, it's not like you're perfect back to normal, but it's like you've gotten hold of the reins again, if that makes sense. You're like, a couple of cleansing breaths, and they're like, whew. You're still breathing a little bit heavier than normal, but you really have began regulation at that point, and that's a sign.
Yeah, you know where I like to use this, Jeff? I like to use this on freestyle swimming. I've tried it a few times with combat swimmer stroke, and the stroke sequence is just so slow. I might only get maybe only skip a breath per stroke, maybe once or twice. I mean, to do 3 or 4 strokes to get halfway across the pool and then not breathe at all. Some reason it's harder for me than it is freestyle. Yeah. So what I like to do is a freestyle pyramid. So I'm an even breather. So I breathe on the same side, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I'll start off the first 100, 2 strokes per breath, which is almost too much breathing. I don't like breathing every 2 strokes either. So it's left, right, I'm breathing. So, and then I'll go to 4 strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe, 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe for 100. Then I go to 6 and 8 and 10, and up to a point where I can't maintain it anymore. So if I have to go from 10 down to 8 or 6 because I need to rest so bad. That's when I rest. When I fail, I try to catch my breath and try to continue that setup, see how high I can go. If I can get up to 12, maybe after that little short rest, maybe I have to rest more in between sets now at those higher levels. And then I'll just come back down, and you're going to see coming back down is so much easier. Your lungs are wide open, and what was hard coming up is going to be easy going back down. And then you can turn the back half of that into sprints. So you can really put in more effort and try to see if you can, because 6 is going to be easy coming down. So let's just push hard on it and see if you can make your time a little faster coming down. And so next thing you know, you've added 1,000 yards of swimming, going 5 levels up, 5 levels down, 100 yards of each set. That's a way to do it, not the way to do it. It's a way. And another way I like to do it, mixing with the combat swimmer stroke, is I do what I call 50-50s. And I've posted this a lot on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, where you go down and back freestyle hard. So you can pick a number, 6 to 8 strokes per breath. And then you go down and back combat swimmer stroke, but trying to catch your breath during combat swimmer stroke.
Yes.
Really focusing on your technique. And if you can maintain a goal pace and catch your breath at the same time, that's when your training is coming together, right? And then it's a 500-yard swim is going to be more obtainable for you after doing this for a couple of weeks. And, you got to put in the time in the pool to get good at swimming.
Yeah, and that's the big one. Yeah, you do have to put enough time to practice this. So one of the things, to piggyback off you, I'll give some folks, I know you and I have talked about this. I'm going to give you guys a real golden nugget. So especially for a swimming evolution of buds, like you go out on the beach. So this is very indicative of how if you've trained hypoxic training correctly, you're basically that 50 meter that Stu is saying, the transition, you can do that in buds and have a tremendous advantage in the ocean. And you do it this way. So once you get to the swim inspection, obviously you don't have control of when you're inspected. You get a sense of where you want to stand, if you want to avoid, if you sense. But I always try to get picked quickly. So I try to get out to the beach very early so I can get my inspection done right away. So they send you the surf to go out to the buoy. My swim partner already knew what was going on. I was like, this is what I need you to do. We get the fins on, and you swim as hard as you can from the time you get your fins on to the buoy. And so by that time, if you have the timed right, you got a bunch of other people that still need their inspection. So you get to the buoy, heart rate is just really high because you're nervous probably, the water is cold, and you just swam your ass off for about 100 meters. What ends up happening is you get this immediate vasoconstriction, right, the flushing of the face, and then as you're waiting for people to come out, you begin purposely kind of bobbing in the water and regulating your breath. So by the time everyone comes out there, gets online, you've vasodilated. Now your body has got surge of oxygen into the blood system, and now you've already primed your system. Nice. And so it's a big advantage because that's what they do. And, you know, if you talk about the collegiate Olympic level, you hear often talk or hear about like, oh, you know, you see swimmers swim an event and all of a sudden you see them in a different pool. A lot of times it's underneath or it's an adjacent pool that they have a different temperature. So they'll elevate their heart rate really, really high in the pool. They get out, they towel off. You see they're walking to the pool. That's why swimmers are always covered, right? Because they're trying to stay hot, trying to stay warm from the pool they just got out of, because the pool is warmer than the one they swim in. So that we're talking like high, you know, if you're Texas, Florida, Olympic level, whatever it is, sure. You're trying to reproduce that in buds, and you can do that in just a few minutes. And that's what Stu's doing by saying, hey, swim your ass off for 50 meters, heart rate goes up. Now through movement and locomotion, we are teaching the body, hey, even when my body gets way up here and stressed out, I can regulate it through consistent, concise, predictable movement and training, and then it regulates itself to that point, and oxygen consumption is very good. So it's teasing your body like that. That's hypoxic training, is you ramp it up and then to a place where you wouldn't swim or run at, potentially. Yep. You bring it down to where you're like, this is the pace I want. Your body will regulate itself to that pace if you practice it. Otherwise, you just keep going off the deep end and you just crash. The nervous system goes, enough.
Right.
And that's why we don't train to failure with like an absolute failure all the time. We just teach our nervous system to just like us.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point too. And, you know, your nervous system is also going to be adapting quickly to the techniques that you are using, you know, especially if you're in the process, you're still trying to learn the stroke, get your pull down, your kick down and everything. You swim really hard freestyle. I don't care if you can swim it well or not. In fact, I usually prefer people who can't swim freestyle very well because they're going to be overworking for that 50. And then they try to do a good, high-quality technique combat swimmer stroke while they are tired and while their nervous system is coming down and coming together with everything just clicks. Next thing you know, you're swimming that combat swimmer stroke without thinking, without having to think, I got to pull this way, kick this way, and your timing's perfect. And, you know, now.
Yeah, I do a similar thing. One or two guys have been able to do this. So I'll swim the butterfly. I'll swim the butterfly for 100 meters and then do combat with fins then too. So you can do one or both, but like that was my favorite stroke on the side of the freestyle. But it's like, because all we're trying to do, folks, is create a real challenge that you mentally have to go, I got to deal with this. And then I got to learn self-regulation. So don't get twisted in the strokes because there's a million ways to do this.
Oh, right? Sure.
So just that's what we're trying to do, black and white. Get you really, really tired, get you purposefully, knowing that on the back end you have to regulate.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes we will do it instead of doing a hard freestyle. We'll just do an underwater dolphin kick with a pair of fins on.
Yep.
And then
you can even do it on the ground. And so before your PST, you could run in place as fast as you could. But that's the other side, is like you could use the PST sit-up in certain things as this, right? So it's practicing this ramp up, regulate, ramp up, regulate, ramp up, regulate. And that's what the PST is.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, again, if we approach the PST and buds as if it's a sport, right? Yeah, to me, it tends to make more sense, you know? And I think because your brain doesn't care if you're doing the obstacle course or playing rugby, right? There's a lot of physical exertion going on. So it's trying to manipulate physiology and convince your brain you're not trying to kill yourself.
Well, that's a good point. Now let's talk a little bit about what's going on physiologically whenever we are holding our breath, because a lot of times I've seen people say, hey, getting ready to go up in the altitude, maybe I should do some hypoxic training here on sea level, because that's the same thing as up there. And maybe we should explain a little bit of the differences of, yes, you can get in better cardiovascular conditioning by doing some hypoxic training at sea level, but it's not the same as having decreased oxygen levels up at 5,000 feet.
Yeah, there's a big difference between the partial pressure, or like how much oxygen is present at sea level versus altitude, versus, okay, what happens biologically at sea level if you're in it. Let's just say that this individual is pretty well trained and they're at sea level. We'll just use an example of a person. Well, at sea level, what we're really training is your body to be given that, the 17 to 13% of oxygen in the atmosphere at sea level. Your body only has that much, and is trying to be efficient with what it's got, right? So that's what it's like. Hey, if you're doing hypoxic training in a pool like we're talking about, we're just trying to maximize our efficiency given the percentage of oxygen there. So that's what the big difference is. Like, you're doing the same thing at altitude, but at altitude you have less oxygen. So to compensate that at altitude, the hemoglobin count goes up, because hemoglobin is what transports oxygen, right? Yep. Now, at sea level, we don't need to drive the hemoglobin up because there's more oxygen present. Now, in good hypoxic training, you'll still bring your hemoglobin up a little bit at sea level, but not like you will at altitude. Right. So that's the thing, is like, okay, they're not equal, and that's why altitude masks don't work. They cannot work because they do not change the partial pressure of oxygen.
Right. That's the key. That's a very good point. Because a lot of people use those masks and think they're doing high altitude
it's
training.
Restricting your airflow,
which make it harder to breathe.
So again, the argument is like, well, hey, you're strengthening your diaphragm. But the only time you need to strengthen your diaphragm is if you've had some really severe bronchitis, pneumonia, or other sort of medical conditions, smoke inhalation. So a lot of firefighters will use it. I think that it's completely misguided for most of them to be using it. But that's a whole other conversation. I'm not trying to throw mud or anything like that. But again, if you look at just the X's and O's of it, so what we got, 13 to 15% oxygen, 70% nitrogen, and then we have mixed gas at sea level. You put a mask on your face, that percentage of oxygen does not change. Yeah. You go to altitude, it has changed, which is why that now they've stopped calling a lot of them altitude masks and called them training masks, because it was not ethical.
Right.
It's just, it's goofy. I get it. But, they'll say, well, like, hey, I'm wearing this mask because it's harder to breathe. It strengthens my diaphragm, et cetera, et cetera. No, because you've limited your oxygen going in so much, because you've made it so hard, you've actually forced depletion and a nervous system shutdown. Like, it's no different than sticking a sock in your mouth and training hard.
You're choking yourself.
Yeah, it's not good for you, because you're forcing your brain to go stop, stop, stop. And that is, you should be listening to your brain.
Right.
So, but again, the upside though, again, it's not even about mass, but to show you the difference is, again, so at sea level, trying to be hypoxic, the end state, doing it properly, is because the urge to breathe comes from buildup of CO2 in your blood, right? So just again, say that the urge to breathe comes from buildup of CO2 or nitrogen in your blood.
Not the lack of oxygen.
Exactly, because there's a lot of oxygen present. It's just that carbon dioxide gets a little bit too high for your body to be comfortable. Because what CO2 does, it saturates the hemoglobin as well, and the O2 can't. It's the same receptor, right, on the blood cells. Yep. So if the CO2 is too prevalent, it's going to attach itself to it. You won't be able to transport oxygen, so the urge to breathe becomes more and more and more. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do, is like, okay, we want the CO2 to be bound to it, right, to those receptors, those blood cells, but we want to get acclimated to it, so it goes, oh, no, we don't need that. Like, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. And the more you train yourself, the less CO2 will attach itself, more oxygen will. So that's where we're saying that's the training window. We want to, elongate that training window, like I.e. is like not so much the breath holds, just as a long breath hold, we're not saying, but these, you know, if you can elongate each inspiration, or like, you know, it's like I'm inspiring every 1.5 seconds during intense activity, but if I can inspire every 1.9 seconds at the same work output, now I've got a much higher aerobic reserve, and your recovery rate is so much better. So when you hit the wall and stop, you're like, so the 5, 6, 7, 8, 2 minutes, whatever you're going to do as a rest period, seemed like an eternity.
Right. I like that. I tell you where I have seen the best results in not only myself, but also the guys that are training with me here, is we get after it in the morning, our normal run, PT, lift, swim, workout. And then after lunch, or maybe even before lunch, you know, later in the day, we will do just a swim workout where we'll tread water as our warm up, and then we'll do like 1,000 to 1,500 worth of just hypoxic training, and that's it. And maybe just a few minutes if somebody's having a hard time with some technique stuff, we'll do some technique stuff. But it's mainly conditioning, you know, because here's what happens when, especially like I said, I like to use this hypoxic stuff for conditioning purposes. So because there's two halves of swimming, it is technique and it is conditioning, and you got to work both.
Truly, 100%, especially in the pool.
Yeah, especially if you're a non-swimmer.
Yes.
Right, who probably has a little less technique than a swimming athlete, your conditioning is probably going to have to be even better.
Yeah.
So
and so there's again the kind of the last thing about altitude I've got is, you know, just to kind of bring this full circle, because I know there's probably questions like, well, what about at altitude? If I live at altitude, what's that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's something that's been perpetuated incorrectly for a long time: is training at altitude is superior than sea level. Well, that's not true at all. What's more superior is sleeping at altitude, training at sea level. Okay. Now, the other side is like, well, what if I am living at altitude and training altitude? Well, you're probably going to acclimate that. So if you've lived at altitude and you're training at altitude, you are not going to recognize the altitude difference in the same way that like someone at sea level is not like, oh, this is easier because I'm at sea level.
Well, how about if you test at sea level? Yeah.
So that's the thing, is if you test at sea level and you've been training and sleeping at altitude, it will be it should be, right. If the training is right, it will be easier. You should, again, the logical, rational thing is like, you should perform at a higher level, but there's some other, you know, sleep and all that stuff. But if all things remain equal and you've slept at altitude and or trained as well, and you're competing at altitude or at sea level, you should perform better. Which is, again, one of the things is like, if you'll notice the Summer Olympics, the last time the Summer Olympics did, they competed at a very high level altitude was the 72 Mexico City, which is really high. It's like 8,200 feet or something.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And the times were all terrible. There's a reason for that. They're probably saying, well, what about Winter Olympics? Not the same thing, because most of those sports are training at altitude and living at altitude. So, you know, one of the things, again, just having experience working with US ski and snowboard very briefly at times in years past, the doctors, what they do is when they're at altitude training, even, they have oxygen masks on them. The Olympic Training Center, the US ski and snowboard racks have oxygen masks in them. When they're done with their sets, they put O2 on.
Wow.
Because they want to train with high levels of oxygen.
Sure.
That's how we become better at our hypoxic training. That's how we recover faster, is oxygen, not depletion of it, not limiting it. I wanted to do that in Virginia Beach, my other business. I wanted to put oxygen into the racks, even at sea level. But you have to have a medical doctor on staff to do that, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you go, wait a minute, we're training it out. The physiology is physiology, and it is what it is.
Well, how about this? Let's take it one step further, and we'll talk second phase, buds. Post pool comp.
Yep.
8. Now you're diving Dregger, so you're diving 100% pure oxygen under pressure.
Yeah. It's like you're basically in your healing tank at all times. You are submerged in salt water, breathing pure O2, although it's still very exerting and very difficult. But if you take a snapshot of a bud student going into second phase and about 2 weeks post-pool comp when all you've been doing is dragger, everyone's 10 pounds heavier, skin looks better, hair looks better, people are better slept. It's not a coincidence. And even the buds instructors will say, like, hey guys, you're breathing pure O2. Wake up, get moving. And it's true, man. It's super true.
It's great. I mean, your run times get faster.
Yeah.
Everything. Just when you think you're done, like you're physically beat. You just went through Hell Week, you just went through pool comp, and like you're just like, oh my God, I don't have a whole lot left. And next thing you know, your run times get faster, your swim times get faster. You catch a second wind on the back half of buds that
it carries you through. And that's the thing, is like you heal because, again, you're in a zero gravity environment, surrounded in salt water and minerals, breathing pure O2.
Yeah, that's so, like your own little Epsom salt bath or an oxygen tank right there.
Yeah, and so like, and you start getting in the, you get into the communities and you start doing a lot of free fall type stuff. If you ever get to that point, all the airplanes that we flew in that were ours and that we contracted out had O2 masks, not just for we did a lot of high altitude skydiving, but quite literally because we worked vampire hours, even in training. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, you've done 2 jumps already, and you're on an hour of sleep over the last 3 days, which happens. You just grab that mask, man, and just start hitting it. And you're like, woo, it wakes you up, boy. It will absolutely wake you up for a short period of time, but just enough because when you hit that minus 35-degree wind at, 25,000 feet, it's cold, and that'll wake you up then.
Yeah, that's true.
But so like just, it's unfortunate that we can't go buy bottles of O2 and like if your grandpa's on O2, don't steal his O2 or nothing like that. But that's where my brain goes. It's like, wait a minute, I could find somebody.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a very good point to mention. So
do not do that.
I'm not sure what we should call this one, the importance of oxygen.
Yeah, like,
right?
And if you haven't, again, guys, read the book Oxygen Advantage, at least the first 6 chapters. And that book does a very, very good job of explaining better than we could. Yeah, really great read.
Patrick McEwen.
Patrick McEwen, for sure. And it just he articulates it much better than Stu and I have, but in context of what we're talking about, I think that's valuable.
And he has some other great hypoxic swim workout training ideas in
and running too. We didn't talk about the running side of how do you really train running side of hypoxia or train, and that the way that he describes running also can be utilized in a resistance environment like a squat rack or whatever it may be too. Just fiddle with it, and because it's not about how much out of breath I can be. It's where can I regulate my breathing while I'm in control when I'm exerting myself a great deal. That's what we're shooting for.
Yep, 100%. And if you're doing it in the pool, don't do it alone.
Don't even consider doing any of
this alone. Underwater swims alone.
Even if there's a lifeguard present.
Lifeguard should know what you're doing.
Yeah, even if they're present, don't consider the lifeguard your safety net. Because no disrespect at all to lifeguards, but there are a lot of times there's a lot of people in the pool, and just don't take the chance doing this by yourself. Yeah,
we've actually had one recently pass out at the finish of a 50, but we do it this way. So I have a guy underwater here, and I have a guy who is his partner, his swim buddy is swimming freestyle over him.
Yep.
Right? And then they come back, and at the 50-meter mark, he comes up, takes his first breath, and then just passes out.
Yep.
Right? And his buddy was right there.
Yeah.
Him up, so it was no big deal.
I do the same thing. So when my guys do it, I have fins on as well, and I just swim behind them the whole time. So because before guys start fading, and I just swim up to them, grab them in the armpits, and I just pull them up. Yeah. So again, I like same with you. That's why Stu and I are in the water with our guys, men and women, because it's the best way to see what's going on too, and it's the safest. So don't do it by yourself.
And if you looked in the last 10 years, just Google it, right? And just do some research on people who die practicing underwater swimming
A lot.
or underwater breath holds.
Yeah.
Maybe they're free divers or they're prepping for a
Yeah.
3-meter underwater swim at Buds, which is just a complete waste of time because
Yep.
like almost
You have the
everybody
lung
passes.
capacity.
Yeah, almost everybody passes that test.
Yeah, and the lung capacity you're going to get from good training, you don't need to practice. And that's, you know, not to kick dirt on anyone's grave, but it's, you know, a lot. Free diving, totally different. We are not talking about free diving training, folks.
No.
You don't need that training for what you're going to encounter.
No.
What we're saying is, you know, you don't need to do these extensive long breath holds to train hypoxic training. Now, not to say that, hey, I want to see if I can do it. It's kind of a good achievement. Yeah, but make sure you have somebody there that's truly capable of watching your back.
Yeah. And the Navy would just say, don't even do it until you're in the Navy.
Exactly.
And we are practicing.
And
we have medics on the
pool,
and we are medics on the pool deck and all of that. So listen, yeah, it's pretty.
Heed our advice because it's the right advice.
And I'm glad you also asked about, or you mentioned the masks, because I know we're probably going to get about 10 emails or questions after this video. Hey, I got a mask. Does that work?
Yeah, I'm not. Again, it's usually, with love and respect, it's usually from the firefighting departments that will want to cite some sort of research-based criteria that is really, dare I say, it's shit. We'll just say that because it is. It's just garbage.
It just makes breathing harder. Like I said, you're choking yourself while you're working out.
Truly. Yeah, just get a straw and stick it in your mouth. If you want that sort of nonsense, do that. Or stick a sock in your mouth, a big sock that you can barely breathe through. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah. So hopefully that helped. True. I think that we probably either confused you more or helped.
Well, like I said, you know, check out that book. Oxygen Advantage. There's some great ideas in here on just the technique of, you know, doing it as well, because he has a little bit different method than I've always done with he exhales everything and then holds his breath. Yeah. Right. And see how long he can hold his breath after an exhale before turning to breathe, which is really hard to do.
It is.
Right? If you hold your breath, you can do this for a long time. Get winded, slowly exhale. And then whenever you're ready to inhale, you can turn to breathe to inhale. But he does it.
He's going all the way down to his like tidal volume. Like he's
so hard. Hard.
But it's what I really like about his teachings is his, how do I say, the rhythm of breathing to me. And now I get it why like the back half of the book is about meditation, because his rhythm of breathing for his hypoxic breathing to me resonated with me extremely well. And for those of you that end up reading the book, you'll know what I'm saying. For me, it's just, I thought it was a really good, because it brought like, how do I think about breathing other than counting? That's all I've ever heard. But actually feeling how I'm breathing and what's going on from the musculature and the bones in my rib cage, it really allowed me to focus on it better. And that really, quite frankly, led me in my desire to meditate from a physical, because now I have a visual.
Nice. Yeah, well, one thing I've done with this too, just another idea, and I'll write these down in the description so you can see what we're talking about, but I'll do his method of exhale, start the swim, and I usually can't make it 50, you know, very far. Maybe I'll take another breath in there and then exhale it while I'm swimming and try to get a whole 50. But I usually just do 25 on an exhale and try to hold it doing freestyle, and then with fins. And then I'll do a flip turn, kick off the wall, and turtleback on the way back, doing nothing but nose breathing. You know, so I got my goggles on, so doing nothing but nose breathing to try to recover. And by the time I get back from my 25-meter turtlebacking, just flutter kicking on my back, I'm ready to go again. And that's a really good, you do that 10 rounds of that, and you've got yourself a good little 500.
Yeah, I got when I got bored and I was sleepy in a car, I started doing his breathing mechanism. I was driving, like I was a year or two ago, I was driving, I was listening to the book, and on the way home from Richmond, I did it the whole way home from Richmond, man, and I didn't get sleepy. I stayed focused. Like it was one of those things that I just thought was a really cool way of like, yeah, just really focusing on breathing for the first time. The way he explains it made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And it's therapeutic.
It is. Totally
makes
is.
you feel better too. So
it does.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, Stu. I appreciate it, man. We'll do this again.
The importance of oxygen. Figure it out.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.